Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalia. If you're new here, I'm excited about this video because I get to talk about books, which is like one of my favorite things ever. On my channel I usually do like foodie, weight loss content, but I like to throw in a little book content in the middle of like my vlogs and like random videos that I do, so I'm so excited for this video. Anyways, I wanted to keep the lighting low, so hopefully you guys can see, because I wanted it to be so cozy. I've got my fireplace going. We've got some ambiance on the TV. You can't really see it. Christmas trees on, and my heater is on, so if you guys hear that, I'm sorry. It's kind of quiet, but if you hear it, I'm sorry. I have my sweater on. Yes, it's a Walt Disney World sweater. We don't really have to talk about it, but I'm cozy and I hope you're cozy too, because today we're going to be talking about my top 10 books of the year. I can't believe it's already December and the year's ended. I have currently read 137 books and it's only December 12th, so I am really proud of that. But I've read some bangers this year and also a bunch of flops, but I'm here to talk about the bangers. So I did my top 10 books of the year with one honorable mention. Also, this is so... should I just turn the TV off? I think I should turn the TV off because the reflection will like absolutely drive me nuts. So off you go, girl. We'll turn you back on later. Okay, so yeah, we're here to do my top 10 books of the year. So yeah, let's get into it. We're gonna start with the honorable mention because I have to. This is How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. This is getting very, very mixed reviews. Me personally, I've never read a better Christmas book in my life. I also did listen to this on audio as well as read it physically, so I'm wondering if the audiobook was just like really fun, because I thought it was so fun. It had like a cast of characters so that each voice sounded different, and I love when audiobooks do that because it really just makes the story come to life even more. But this is basically like a spicy, doesn't follow the story exactly, but it's Grinch inspired, so there's like little elements. Like one of the best friends in the book, his name is Max, like the dog, and then the aunt in this book is named Cindy, like Cindy Lou Who. So there's like really fun Grinch sprinkles in there that I just loved. This story follows our girl's story, and basically she kind of like left this small town years and years ago and kind of left everybody hanging. She kind of badmouthed the town when she left, and her best friend at the time, Cole, just never wanted to talk to her again. So they basically just never spoke to each other again. Well, her aunt who lives in this town, who is like this town is like super obsessed with Christmas, and she goes to her aunt's house every year until she left, you know, badmouthed the town and left. So she comes back one year because her aunt Sydney needs help doing like a Christmas competition, and that's where she kind of reconnects with Cole, and they have this like enemies thing going on, and it was true enemies for a while. Like I really loved that the enemies weren't just like enemies for 5 seconds and then they're lovers. Like they were really like fighting, and it was so funny. I was giggling out loud. Megan Quinn always makes me laugh. Like if I want to laugh, I just need to pick up a Megan Quinn book. But yeah, I'll stop talking about this so much because one, I butcher plots, and two, it's honorable mention. But if you're looking for a really good Christmas book before the season ends, please give this one a shot. It was so good. Okay, so in no particular order, we're gonna start with my top 10 books of the year, and I'm just gonna grab it as the stack goes. So, or should we do it in a particular order? Should we do it in a particular order? Okay, I literally just sat here and put them all in order from number 10 to number 1 because I did want to like, I don't know, have somewhat of an order. So anyways, at number 10 is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I was super surprised by this book. I picked it up on a whim, but basically we're following Anna, who is a wedding planner, and Elliot Bloom, who is a flower shop owner. which I loved. I thought it was so cool. He's a grumpy flower shop owner. And then we have Anna, who is like, she's not like sunshine, but she's like a lot more sunshine than him. But anyways, so they end up having to work together in this story because a certain person wants Anna to plan the wedding and wants Elliot as the flower person for the wedding, and they end up having to work together, and they're total enemies, and then they become lovers. I guess I have a kind of like a trend. I love enemies to lovers, but this story really surprised me. Not only was it so good, it was so sweet, and Julie Soto is a beautiful writer. Like I was in it. Like every second of this book, I was like, I could not put it down. I just thought it was so sweet. And then also I just really loved Elliot because he was like this like grumpy but like secretly not grumpy. I don't know how to explain it. This was just so good to me. The chemistry between these two was just I ate it up, and I was just like begging for them to get together. So I really loved this. It was an amazing romance book. This is like one of the blueprints for romance for me. So that is number 10. Number 9, I didn't know whether to put this at number 9, but I just had to because there's so many other good books on my list. But this is One Star Romance by Laura Hankin. So this story follows Natalie and Rob, and basically they are both like being forced together because Natalie's best friend is marrying Rob's best friend. So like every year or every other year they have to come together and like do an event with their best friends, and so they're kind of forced to see each other every year. But basically Natalie finds out that Rob left a 1-star review on her book, but he doesn't know that she knows, and so he's kind of like, why does she not like me? And she's like, I cannot stand him, da 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 da. This was so good. This was so freaking good. I ate it up. I loved that they like wouldn't see each other for a year, and then they would see each other again, and then it would be like all this chemistry, and like I don't know, it was just so good to me, and the ending was so sweet and so good, and I cannot recommend this book enough. If you're looking for like this reminded me of Emily Henry. Like I don't know what it is, it 100% reminded me of Emily Henry. I don't know, it gave like the characters gave what Emily Henry would write, and I think it's fantastic. I don't know if this is this author's debut. No, it's not. But I ate this up. This was so incredibly good. So I had to give it number 9 because it was one of my favorite books of the year for sure. Okay, my number 8 spot is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. This book truly surprised me. This book is following a man named Doug. In their world, they can make robots to essentially like be what they need. So if you want a maid, you can make a robot to be a maid, or if you want a robot for your like emotional and physical needs, you can have one as well. And this book surprised me because Annie, the robot for Doug in this book, ends up kind of like turning more and more human every day. One, it's kind of scary because it's kind of scary to think like, can robots actually, you know, have feelings and emotions? But also it was like so sweet, Annie finding out like she deserved better than Doug and like wanting to like live a life. It's just very intricate, and I could sit here and try to explain it, but this was so good to me. It was beautiful in my eyes. Like I was so surprised. This is not like the type of book that I would usually go for, but like it was so good. And then the ending had kind of like this like fast pace. It had me like, what is gonna happen? What's gonna happen to Annie? Like I was just really into this book, so I had to give it the number 8 spot because it was definitely a book that I will not forget. So number 7, I'm gonna put on the screen because I do not own this book, but I definitely need to own it because it was so surprisingly good and I really loved it. It's Love Letters to a Serial Killer by Tasha Coriel. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But basically, oh my god, it sounds as unhinged as this book was. I guess I just have a thing for super unhinged books because I ate it up. So basically this story follows Hannah, I think it is. So basically this story follows Hannah, and Hannah ends up writing to a serial killer. And he surprisingly writes back and is like, hey, you sound kind of hot, like we should keep talking. And she was like really surprised. And so they kind of like keep talking and she falls for him. And once he gets out of prison, they end up living together, but she starts to get very sketched out by him. And she starts thinking like, did he do it? Da, 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 da. And so she starts investigating kind of like the murder. And it is so crazy. This book was insane. I'm trying to tell you guys, I did not expect the ending. The plot twist, the ending, oh my god, was so crazy. Like that last chapter blew my mind. It blew my mind. I was like, what is going on? This book is so unhinged. Every single second was unhinged and so good, and I could not put it down. Like I just couldn't do it. I had to give it my number 7 spot because I loved it. Okay, number 6 is Ask for Andrea by Noelle W. Illy. This was so good. I remember reading this and my heart was pounding. Like the ending just had my heart pounding and I was just like, what's gonna happen? So basically we follow the perspective of 3 different girls who got murdered by the same man who they met in different ways. But he's like this handsome man who has a family, but he's like secretly crazy. He's like secretly a murderer, and we follow their perspective as ghosts as they try to go on. They're trying to pass on, if that makes sense, but they can't pass on because nobody can figure out who murdered them. So basically they're still like lingering on Earth, and basically we're following their perspective and like everything that happens to that man and how they end up finding out, you know, who murdered these 3 different girls. It's just insane. I know the plot sounds crazy, but we are following those 3 ghost perspectives and it just gets crazier and crazier. Like we figure out how they died. Like at the end when, I don't want to spoil it, but at the end when it all comes down to it, it had my heart racing. It had me being like eating it up. So, okay, so this is where it starts to get kind of hard because all of these books I consider amazing. Like from this point on, I will never forget these books. So anyway, it is in a numerical order, if you will, but in my heart there's no order. Anyways, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book is as good as everyone says it is. This has magical realism elements to it, which I eat up every single time. But basically this girl moves into her aunt's apartment after she passes away, and sometimes when she goes in the apartment ends up being 7 years back in the past, or I think it's the past and the future, I'm not really sure. But basically she meets this guy and they meet in this like magical apartment and they have these like amazing dates, and oh my god, this book was just beautiful. Like it was so good. And not only was the story, like the romance, so sweet, but there was like the dude in this book, he's a chef, and so there was just like beautiful like cooking elements, which I just love when a story talks about like food, because I just love food and like I'm a foodie, and I just like found this story to be so good. And not only did it have like romance, food, they were beautiful. Clementine, and I forget his name, I'm talking about how beautiful this is and I can't remember homeboy's name, but like I remember Clementine, and this boy, he was like just a beautiful boy, like just perfect boyfriend material, like what I would want in a man. And I just loved this story so much. If you're looking for romance, magical realism, like a foodie type book, this is it. This is it, and it's so good. It's one I also own. I do own this book, but I cannot find it for the life of me. And this is The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. My friend Lakin made me read this book with her, and I was kind of like, you know, I read Fourth Wing, I didn't love it, but I read this book and I could not believe how good this was. Miss Rebecca Yarros, I feel like historical fiction could be your thing. Romance, historical fiction, like could be your thing, because this book was so good. So basically this book is like a story about a couple different couples, but the timeline goes from like present day to, I believe, World War One. I want to say it was World War One. And we follow a couple back during that time, and just how the story just like adds up with all of the couples, and like how it ends, and the plot twist at the end is just insane. Like, it's one of the best plot twists I've read, seriously. And also, like, the romance between all the couples was just like heart pulling, like tugged on my heartstrings, if you will. Like, I cried also. I cried during this book. I like teared up, and like that is a huge sign that that girl can write romance, because I don't cry during every romance, but when I can cry, like, it's just it pulls at your heartstrings. So that's 100% one of my new favorite books, and I did not know where to put it in this like numerical type thing because there's such good books on this list, but that's like one of my top books that I will always recommend. And also, I don't do a good job at explaining plot, but I'm telling you, you just have to trust me when I say it's so good. Next book, you guys are going to like laugh at me, but you just have to hear me out. Number one, anything Ali Hazelwood writes is for me. It's for me. It's fun. It's funky. It's fresh. It's so good. And so, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Yeah, it's really high up. Okay, but you have to hear me out. You have to hear me out. Okay, so this story, this is like a romance between a vampire and a werewolf, which you've already got me hooked. Twilight was my thing back in the day. Like, you've already got me hooked. And Ali Hazelwood wrote this. It was like my perfect dream as a book. But basically, it's like the truest enemies to lovers type story ever. And I just love a like magical, not magical. I just love like this fantasy world that I was living in. Like, he was so down bad for her as well. He couldn't even like be near her. Like, he would smell her and be like, oh, I can't be near her. And this was just like, I can't even explain it. I'm at a loss for words, because like, embarrassing to a fault, yes, but this is one of like the best pieces of literature out there. I love you, Ali. I really do. And I hope you write more like Omegaverse vampire werewolf stories, because this was it, girl. I loved it. But these two books stole the show this year for me, and I can't stop thinking about them. So number two is The Women. It's The Women by Kristen Hanna. I had to put this in here. This was so good. I didn't think I was a historical fiction girly. Like, I read Rebecca Yarros, and I wouldn't really classify that as historical fiction. It was more romance. But this was like actual historical fiction. So I didn't think I was like a historical fiction girly, but I read about this. I learned so much. I learned so much about the Vietnam War that I had no idea about, which I loved. I was like, I'm learning and I love reading this book, and it's like, but basically we're following, what is her name? I forget. We're following Frankie, and she wants to go into the Vietnam War as like a doctor, and her parents are like super against it, but she ends up going, and this is just telling her story about being a woman and a doctor in the Vietnam War, and how badly women specifically got treated in the war. Like, they just were not acknowledged for any of their work that they did. They were not acknowledged for any of the work that they did in the Vietnam War, and they endured so much. They endured so much trauma because of this war, and then absolutely were not acknowledged. And also, when she got out of the war and went home, she was basically like spit on by people, because they just did not think the war was like necessary, and anybody who was entangled in it was just like trash. And it's just like this heartbreaking story about how women were treated during the Vietnam War, and also about how heartbreaking the Vietnam War was in general. And so it was just such an eye-opening, beautiful story to me, and I had to give it the number 2 spot. It was very hard to put it number 2 because I loved it so much, but yeah, I love this story. Please give it a read if you haven't. I did read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I did not like it as much as I liked this. I didn't think Kristen Hanna was going to be for me until I read this, and this has changed my whole entire view on historical fiction. I just think you need to have the right historical fiction book, and you'll fall in love with the genre. So this did that for me. And I'm just now realizing a lot of these books are book of the month books, which a lot of people trash in book of the month. They don't like the picks, but I end up almost loving every single book of the month pick that I get. Anyways, this is going to be my number 1 book for the year. I can't stop thinking about this book. It blew my mind when I read it, and I had to give it its number 1 spot. The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This came out of left field for me. I remember when this came out and everybody was talking about it, I was like, oh, I might read it. It's kind of thick, and like a thriller that's that big cannot be good. But this is like the slowest of slow burn thrillers, but it was the best thriller I read. The best book that I read all year, to be honest. I did not guess. I did not guess what was going to happen at all. And if that can happen to me, then you're getting the #1 spot, because usually when I'm reading a thriller, I can somewhat guess what's going to happen. I did not get that at all. Not only did I not guess like the plot twist, I just felt like this story was so well written. It was so well written. I was not bored at any point. For a thriller to be like 500 pages, I want to say, yeah, this junk is like almost 500 pages. 476 pages. And for me to read all of that and eat it up, not know what's gonna happen, be so invested in the story, it's just, you've got to be an amazing author. You've got to be just an awesome author. Like, I don't know. The prose was just so good. And also, like, I was just hypnotized by this book. It was so good. And it's funny because this takes place in, basically, it says a teenager vanishes from her Adirondack summer camp, and then two worlds collide. So this kept going back in 2 different time periods, if you will, and it was just so good. And like, I could not figure out what was gonna happen. And also, like, the scenery of it being set in the Adirondack mountains just was so good. It was so good. Like, I could picture it. Anyways, I could go on forever. This got my #1 spot this year. It's definitely a book that I will want to reread and recommend to everyone. These two definitely did it for me the most this year. And they're both book of the month, which is insane, honestly, now that I see it. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite book of the year was, and yeah, leave it down below. Love you guys so much, and I'll see you in my next one.